Welcome to the Real Life Diabetes Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Kluwer, and I've lived with type 1 diabetes for decades and enjoy sharing my story and those of other people living their best life with this disease. This podcast is about sharing those stories, the real, unfiltered experiences of people living, learning, and finding their own way with diabetes. All right, enough rambling. Let's get started. Welcome back. Today's guest, Brandon Essex, caught my attention after a post about an MMA fight where he was paired with a fellow type 1. But I don't know about you, and I know nothing about MMA fighting, but all I could think about is how did diabetes play a role in something that's going to be stressful and very physical? So, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we do not know each other. We've never met in person. Again, it was like, seriously, I always look for interesting people, and I don't know any MMA fighters. So let's start with your diagnosis story.
Sure. So I was diagnosed when I was 6 years old. A lot of times when I say that to people, they have a sympathetic reaction or something. But to me, I feel like it was easier that way. I never had to learn how to have diabetes. I just grew up having it. So it feels like it was lucky getting it that young, as weird as that sounds. But I feel like it was better off that way.
Well, and did you go into DKA? Did you have a family history?
So I didn't. I am lucky number one in my family. So that was fun. But I kind of lucked out. My mom had a coworker whose son was diagnosed with diabetes. So she knew a lot of the symptoms to look for. So when I started having, the extreme thirst and the frequent urination and everything, she clocked it very early on and took me to the doctor before DKA ever set in. So I think the highest my blood sugar went before I was diagnosed was somewhere in the 300 or 400s. Like, we caught it very, very early.
That's okay. So similar story for me is they caught it before I was ever in DKA, and I just turned 8 years old. So I agree with you on so many levels. I really didn't know much before, so that transition, I've known every stage of my life has been type 1 influenced, I guess. And I feel for the ones that are diagnosed when they're 19 or 23. Man, everybody has their own story. So let's talk about your current regimen. Everybody manages their diabetes differently.
Yeah, so mine is a little, I guess we'll call it chaotic. It kind of goes in phases because participating in combat sports, a lot of times I'm cutting to make certain weight classes for things like MMA fights or jiu-jitsu tournaments and those kinds of things. And a lot of times when I'm doing that, it's not just a matter of monitoring my calorie intake. It's also a matter of monitoring what kinds of calories I'm taking in. And that's even more important with the diabetes because I have to make sure not only am I not spiking my blood sugar, but I have to make sure that, I'm getting carbs and fats at the right times of day so that I'm not dropping super low in the middle of the night and stuff like that. It's become a real balancing act when I'm doing that.
What is your weight? So I know, so you're saying there's different weight classes, and I understand that to some capacity, but what was your weight? And there was a cute little clip of you getting weighed in for this past fight. What is the goal weight?
For example, when I weighed in for my fight, I weighed in at 158 pounds.
Okay.
When I was walking around beforehand, I was somewhere in the 165 to 170 pound region. Closer to the beginning of the year, I was walking around closer to 180, 185 pounds. So my weight fluctuates kind of drastically throughout the year, depending on what I'm doing and what I'm getting ready for.
Okay. I have a lot of questions to that. Do you feel like having type 1 diabetes helps you to put on the weight, lose the weight, or whatever, because we're so in tune with our bodies?
I don't necessarily think it helps. I think I have to be a little bit more careful about it.
Sure.
I know a lot of people do, you know, way more ridiculous weight cuts than I've ever done, and they'll cut their calories a lot more drastically. I have to be a lot more calculated about it, just because I do have to, be careful about my blood sugar and things like that. And then one of the other things that I usually try to do is if I know I have to cut weight for like a tournament or something, I'll try to register for a tournament where I know that I can get a little bit more below the weight class, so that I can lose extra weight ahead of time, just in case if I have a low blood sugar day of or something like that, I can still have Gatorade or glucose, some kind of mitigating calories to make sure my blood sugar gets back up into an acceptable range without missing weight. So it takes a little bit more planning and calculation and stuff like that. Um, I don't necessarily think it helps, but I don't feel that it hurts it either.
Yeah. Well, so going into this last fight, do you wear an insulin pump or CGM? What's your day to day?
I do. So I have Dexcom for my CGM. I'm actually still on the G6 right now.
Holding out to the last minute.
Yeah, yeah, as much as I can. I have probably 2 months left as a backlog, but I'll probably have to switch when that's gone. And then I use the Tandem T Slim insulin pump.
Okay, so that is and let me tell you, I just switched from the G6 to the G7, and I held out to the very last sensor, so I understand, and I think there's a lot of people in the same boat. With that being said, both devices have worked. It was an easy transition. Um, okay, so obviously you can't go into a fight with a tubed pump, or I mean, what are the rules?
This was my first MMA fight. I've done, jiu-jitsu and judo competitions.
Mhm.
Usually I'll remove the tube pump part. And then like for my site, for my CGM and my like my
Infusion.
insulin site, I'll like cover them with gauze and then use KT tape to like
Okay.
keep them adhered to my body, so I don't have to worry too much about them getting ripped out. But for the MMA fight, there weren't specific rules around it. They basically, I had to get a doctor's note that said, I talked to my endo and I had a plan for that kind of thing. So basically, I kind of timed it out. My CGM expired the day of the fight, so I was able to take it out right before I went out.
Right.
I did the same thing to my insulin pump site.
Yeah.
So I just removed them both right before I went out into the ring, and then I replaced them as soon as the fight was over.
Okay. What was your blood sugar going into the fight?
195 was the last reading that I had before I went in.
And is there ever, I know this is a loose, open ended question because it's never that simple, but is there a goal blood sugar going into a fight like that?
So I was trying to keep it a little bit higher. I didn't want to be like teetering on the like. I didn't want to be like perfect 100, anything
Yeah.
like that. Just because adrenaline can have
Weird
all kinds
effects.
of interactions. Yeah, it could spike me. It could drop me. I didn't want to have to worry, especially about dropping in the middle of the fight. That would have been really hazardous if I had started to become impaired in the middle of something like that. So I was aiming for like that, 180 to 200 region, just because, I factored in that I would probably drop during the fight because of how much physical activity it was. So
Right. Well, I think it's one of those, and like I have a whole list here of like what spikes your blood sugar, what lowers it. And that is such a crazy combination because you are so physical for a short amount of time. So there's adrenaline, there's the physical activity, which could lower it, there's the stress of it. And then you're also getting physical blows, which I would think would raise your blood sugar. That's like trauma to the body. Talk to me about
right.
that.
Yeah, that was, throughout my training camp, it was a little bit easier to manage just because, like I said, I would keep everything attached. So usually I had my CGM attached on one side and I would keep my pump pretty close by in the gym. Like it wouldn't be attached to me, but it would be
Yeah,
usually within, a couple of feet so that I was still getting the readings so that in between rounds and everything like that, I could still like, just pick it up real quick, see what my blood sugar was, put it back down. Uh,
right,
if it was starting to go too high, I would, connect it, and give myself a couple of units real quick. Or if it was going low, I would just, chug a little bit of like, Gatorade or whatever else I had on hand, just to make sure that I was, keeping myself right in the sweet spot. Um, but that's always the toughest part about it, is I talk to people at the gym about it because everybody finds out that I'm diabetic and they have all kinds of questions and they're curious about how it impacts everything. And I always have to explain to them, the physical activity itself drops my blood sugar, but the adrenaline can spike it. And then the other part is because, a lot of my training sessions, I'll be there for, 2 or 3 hours. Being disconnected from my pump for that long also has another effect where, like, even though the physical activity is causing my body to lower my blood sugar, the lack of insulin going into my body is causing it to rise a little bit. So it becomes this like tightrope walk for the time that I'm there. You know what I mean?
100%. I've interviewed other people where it's similar scenarios, and obviously not being physically, I'm going to say battered. That's not the right word. Chosen to be hit. I don't know. And, going back to whenever the other fights that jujitsu, I don't know how to say that, jujitsu.
Yeah, jujitsu. Mm-hmm.
So when you do those and things are still attached, like you said, the gauze and the KT tape or whatever, if somebody kicks you in that, that's going to hurt.
Yeah, it hurts a little bit. It's not terrible.
Okay.
It's not as bad as some other spots. Honestly, as weird as it is, the thing that I worry about the most is getting it ripped out because I don't want to have to replace them, and I don't want to have to call and say hey, it got ripped out early. I need to order more.
I'd
Uh,
love to be the customer service person on the other end. You did what? You were in a what?
right, right, yeah. So I try to avoid it mostly for that reason. It doesn't hurt that much to have it impacted. It's really more of I'm trying to avoid getting it ripped out kind of a deal.
Right. Well, and so going back to the childhood diagnosis, did you do competitive sports like this in your younger years?
Um, Not in my much younger years. I mostly played like soccer and baseball when I was a little kid. I got into wrestling when I was about 12 or 13.
Okay.
Um, so that was like, late middle school and then high school. I did a lot of wrestling. And it was kind of a similar situation where I was just trying to like keep it attached and like it would get some impact, but not a terrible amount. Um,
I can't imagine that.
yeah, I mean, the biggest thing back then too was I was only on an insulin pump. I didn't have a CGM back then. So that was a little bit easier to manage. It was only one site that I had to worry about versus two.
Right.
Um, and I actually there was another type 1 diabetic on my wrestling team, coincidentally. So
Look at you. Just that's great. It's nice to see a familiar face. And so the guy that you fought, you won the fight, correct?
I did, yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Is this is maybe not a great question, but do you get paid for this?
So I did get some commission based on how many tickets I sold. So it wasn't like an upfront payment, but because so many people paid to, I got some compensation for it.
That's great. Well, that's a great reason for us to all support you on all the socials and stuff. So when you fight again, are you going to fight again?
Uh, I don't think so, but I'm not totally ruling it out. I'm 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 getting older. I'm 34 now. So
Oh, poor
when
kid.
I went into this, I no, when I went into this, it was kind of a bucket list item. I wanted to make sure I did one of these before I was too old to do it.
Right.
Um, but so the plan was always just a one and done. But um, the adrenaline rush and the excitement was just unlike anything else. So I don't want to say I'll never do another one, but at the moment, the plan isn't to do another one.
Right. And something else when it comes to where always get the doom and gloom and the fear and whatever, but word on the street in the medical community, type ones heal a lot slower. And of course, having open wounds and things like that can affect your blood sugar, infection, all kinds of stuff. Is that ever a concern for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an autoimmune disease, so I always try to be a lot more careful about any kind of cuts and bruises and things. And obviously, doing combat sports, you're putting yourself at risk for a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Um, and in addition to especially when you're cross training and things, or doing tournaments, like there's always risks of things like ringworm or staph and things like that. So I'm always very particular about making sure I shower immediately after. I have special like I went out and bought special soap that like helps fight a lot of those like skin conditions and stuff like that. So like that kind of mitigates a lot of that. Um, but yeah, like
You haven't had any problems with healing.
I definitely, not that I've noticed. You know, it's kind of tough to tell when you're getting banged up all the time. But
What's healing, what's on its way in, what's on its way out.
right, right.
And so you I don't know if you chose or if you had to have a letter from your medical team stating that you were in a position to fight, making sure that everyone knew what was going on. Did the medical team, like I'm sure they have a medical team that's right there should shit really hit the fan with one of the fighters. Did they know, and did they have special things just for you? Well, both of you as type ones, I mean, we could have had a real low blow.
Yeah, for sure. So they did know that I was diabetic. Before, like the day of the fight, in addition to all the physicals that we had to get and the letter from my endo that I had to get to, let them know that I had spoken to him and that I, knew how to manage it and that I had a specific plan going in for how it was going to be managed. Um, we had to get medically cleared beforehand. Um, and while I was getting medically cleared, we had to disclose to that doctor that I was a type 1 diabetic. So they were aware of it before I got into the ring. Um, as for exactly what kind of preparation they had on their end for that, I don't know for sure. I didn't I
I
didn't
would bet
think
it was
to
like
ask
a,
about it.
what is it, a glucagon pen or the nasal? I can't think of the name of it. Like if
Um,
you were to be seriously low, again, I mean, that's not my problem.
no,
They know what they're
so
doing, you know?
right, right. I mean, luckily, I always keep those things on me, just just in case, obviously. Um, and I have showed my coaches how to use those things, so hopefully, if anything happens, they would have been able to take care of me. Um,
And are you in regular training like year round?
for the most part, yeah,
Do you teach at all?
I do. I teach kids jujitsu and kids striking.
Do you have any T1 kids?
I don't. I do train with another type 1 diabetic who's a little bit older than me, but none of the kids are diabetic.
Okay. And so going back to the person that you fought in this last fight, are they called fights? Matches?
Yeah, they're fights.
Okay. Um, did you talk about his type? Did you guys talk about your diabetes prior to it?
A little bit, yeah. Because we were both kind of, surprised. We've been building to this fight for a while, and it's not the most common thing in in MMA. So the fact that, and it was both of our first fight, so we were both, pretty shocked that we've both been building to this for so long. We've both been trying to find an opponent for so long that by the time we did, we find another type 1 diabetic. We were both, just pretty surprised about it. It was, we both got a good laugh out of it.
If
Uh,
I would have been press, which for all of this, I would have been on the sidelines being like, okay, I need to see everybody's blood sugar going into this. I need, you know what I mean? Like I would have been comparing it, not to compare you all, but because you're going through the same thing, but your blood sugar, one could be 60 and one could be 500
right.
based on everything. So you, one, is that other person okay? I didn't see him after the fight.
Oh yeah, he's fine. We ended up talking after the fight.
Well, and I saw, and if you have type 1 diabetes, you have diabetes and you wear a CGM, you know all the beeps. And so there was an interview that was posted right after the fight. Your eye, I think it was still bleeding. And in the background, you can hear the Dexcom sensor going off that there was not a connection. And I was just like, ah, the bells that are going off. So
Yeah,
I'm
that had
curious.
probably been going off for a little while. I didn't realize it. Because right after, like I
Yeah.
said, I had to rip everything out before I went in. Um, so I immediately went and showered and changed my pump. Um, and that alarm that was going off was because when I finished changing my site, I never clicked the last button, so it still wasn't delivering insulin, and I was like, "Oh no!" So
Okay, personal life. Do you have a day job? What does your day to day look like?
I do. So I actually work. I have an administrative job for a pharmaceutical company.
Oh,
Yeah.
does it include diabetes care? And can I get some connections?
My specific role doesn't, unfortunately. I'm still. hopefully I'll get to that insider look eventually. But for right now, unfortunately, no, I don't deal with diabetes care.
Do you have any children?
I don't know. I have a dog, but no
That's
kids.
great. And the only reason I ask that is because I think as people in, I'm going to say childbearing age, I want to know if you had children, would you get them tested for, now we can see the antibodies and do all kinds of things. If you had children, would you get them tested?
I definitely would. Like I said, I'm the only diabetic in my family, on both sides. None of my cousins, nieces, nephews, uncles, aunts, anything like that.
Right.
Going back as far as I can find, I have no evidence of anybody else in my family being diabetic, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't still get my kids tested to make sure. Just because it's definitely easier to be ahead of the curve on that one. So if you can get a heads up that it might be there eventually, I would definitely want to have a little bit of a heads up.
Well, and you said that you work out sometimes with a fellow type 1 that's a little bit older. Outside of that, do you feel like you're involved in the diabetes community in your area?
Um, Not as much as I would like to be, unfortunately. Most of my diabetes connections are through Facebook and things like that, like the support groups and everything. I don't deal with that many, like in my area. Most of the ones that I know are either like my friend through training or some of the people that I went to high school with have it. So there's like the one guy that I wrestled with, he's got it. Um, and then another girl that graduated with my brother, she also has it. So like I stay a little bit connected with them, but uh,
And what area, where do you live? And I'm only saying that so if somebody's interested in connecting with you, or because there's T1D meetups now and with through Breakthrough T1D and then private groups. I'm not saying that you should attend, but I've been to a couple and they've actually, it's been a nice way to connect with people, especially in other towns. So what area, where do you live?
so I'm in northeastern Pennsylvania, like pretty close to Scranton.
Okay. For some reason I was thinking New Jersey. I don't know why, but
That's what my fight was.
I'm trying to think of, is there anything else that you want to share about? Well, let me just pause that for a second. Did your parents ever, my parent, let me preface this with, my parents let me do anything I wanted. In fact, I mean, I managed my own diabetes. I did everything from an early age. The only thing that they ever really kind of put the brakes on for me was playing soccer because they were worried that my blood sugar would go too low. And mind you, this was in 1986. So it was a long time ago. Did your parents keep you from doing anything because of diabetes?
Not directly, I don't think. My parents encouraged me to be, physically active, to do all the things that I wanted to do, but they were also realists about it. They needed to make sure that I understood the risks and that I was, prepared to take care of myself. Like they were always, from a young age, most people are like wallet, watch, phone. All right, I'm out.
Yeah.
It was like wallet, watch, phone, test kit, pump. Okay, now I'm good. Like I can kind of go. So, no, I don't think they really. My parents have always been very supportive. I don't think they ever limited me on anything. There were some precautions that they took, like when I was a kid and stuff like that. If we were going to do sleepovers, they always wanted to be at their house just because they didn't want to have to
Yeah.
or sending me off somewhere. It was just a little bit easier that way. But no, they were always very supportive. They were just, like I said, realists about it. They wanted me to be prepared and be ready for everything. Making sure. I can remember from a really young age, my mother, and it's funny. I can tell that I'm going low way before I ever go low. And I think a lot of that comes from when my mom would test my blood sugar when I was early on in my diagnosis. She would, if my blood sugar was low or high or whatever, she would look at me and she'd go, "Remember how you feel right now. This is what it feels like when your blood sugar's low." And I was like, "Oh, okay," and she drilled that into my head. So now I can tell something's wrong way before it actually happens. Like if my blood sugar is starting to fall and I'm 130, I can kind of tell that it's going to go,
Yeah.
further down than that.
Well, okay, and that's a great lead into a question. Like I still feel my lows. I don't have as many lows now that I'm on a pump and whatever, but my lows as a kid, I would sweat really hard, like most, and shake. I would shake, and my nose would get really numb, and then my mouth. What were you? Yeah. So, what are your? What were your lows like as a kid? When you think about the feeling, like what were the physical things?
Yeah, the cold sweats have always been the biggest one. As soon as that starts, I know it's happening. And then I get a little bit of the shakiness, not as much. It's more like I feel weak. Like my whole body just kind of wants to lay down.
Yeah.
Um, and I get like those green floaters. Like my vision starts to kind of go when my blood sugar goes low. I don't know why. That's that's one of the ways that I've been able to tell in the past if I'm out in the sun and then I go into a little bit of a darker area and I can barely see because my vision's starting to go. I'm like, oh no, my blood sugar's low and I didn't even realize it yet.
I've never heard that one. That is interesting. Have to
Yeah,
do some research on if that's,
yeah, I don't know if that's a common one for everybody, but that's definitely one that happens to me. I definitely know what's happening when that happens. And then it's funny that you mentioned the numb nose and the numb mouth because that I definitely get that one too.
there are so many things that I could say right now that are completely inappropriate. I'm going to keep it together. But with you, not for me, not having a family history, and I have my own conspiracy theories, and you not having one, what are your thoughts on why you were the chosen one?
Um, I don't really 100% know. I know for a while they thought that I followed a sort of pattern where it was kids ages something like 4 to 10 who developed diabetes after a bad bodily infection. I had a bad ear infection, and that kind of led into it. My mom's coworker's son actually had the same thing. It was a pneumonia right before he got his, and he was about the same age, between 4 and 10. So I've heard about that one in passing, and the diabetics that I know, it kind of makes sense. Like it matches up with a lot of us. So
Well, and that is, you just said something that I'd never thought of. So I had ear infections as a kid. I had tubes. It was a nightmare. And before my diagnosis, I had pneumonia.
oh, okay.
And so I feel like, and I mean, my immune system was a wreck. And then all the antibiotics, my parents did everything that was asked of them. And I'm thankful for having the treatment that we needed at the time to get me feeling better. But yeah, I was shortly diagnosed after back to back illnesses. So there's gut health. And with you being so physically active, like I read so much about, I'm going to say conspiracy theories, but now the scientific community is actually realizing these are the environmental factors here are, there are more people with type 1 that do not have a family history than ever before. And I think about, like, if I do not have children, and I won't, but if you had children, because we've changed our genetic makeup, would they be more likely if it's not, will this create, that's so deep and dark, but something to think about.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely a thought in the back of in the back of your mind. Somebody had to be the first in every family history, right? It's a matter of what kind of genetic mutation is it, or what
Yeah.
environmental factor is it? An environmental factor that's like a family tradition that you're going to pass on, something like that. Like there's a whole lot of factors in it. You don't know for sure what causes it, so
Okay.
it's tough to say.
Yeah, well, that's well said. And I have two last questions for you. Number one, because it's been all over the news and socials, I do not know his name, and even if I did, I probably can pronounce it. But the tennis player who cleaned house and has been rocking it with Type 1, and there's been a lot of, I'll send you the links and it'll be in the show notes. But this person has come, and you'd see him give injections on the sideline, and he would jump off and test his blood sugar. And there was a lot of backlash actually from some of the community. And then all I could think about is, why are we giving injections on the side? Why aren't you wearing a pump? Just da, 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 all the things. And I don't know if he would be allowed to, but I'm saying that to you. When you see other athletes, is there any other sport that you're like, how do you make it happen? How do you work this?
On Interestingly enough, my brother pointed out to me that there's a professional MMA fighter who's a Type One, and that he pointed that out to me earlier this year. I didn't know about it, so that kind of gave me a little bit more confidence going into this. But yeah, anytime I see a Type One diabetic succeeding in professional sports, this is the peak of physical fitness that people can achieve is to be a professional athlete, right? So for a Type 1 diabetic to achieve that, especially with There are stigmas around type 1 diabetes. I think most of us that have type 1 have experienced that in some way or another. So to watch someone succeed like that, it's kind of like, yes, like someone's showing that we can do all of these things. We don't have to be
100%.
limited by this.
And that kind of leads into my last question is if a young person or a parent of a young person living with diabetes or anybody actually, you had to give them, I'm going to say words of advice or your way of thinking when it comes to challenges like MMA fights and living with type 1, what would you say?
I'd give them the advice that basically my parents always supported me with, and it's don't let diabetes limit you from anything, but be prepared for the fact that you're going to have to do more planning and be more careful. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it.
I love that. And with all things in life, sometimes we need more planning. And I think I would like to believe that because of type 1 diabetes and my planning abilities, it's made me a stronger person in the professional and personal life. It's annoying at times, but yeah. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we're going to keep an eye. Please keep me posted, and I will make sure that everybody that listens to this follows you. If you decide to fight again, if it's not MMA, I don't care, but let us know so we can support you because we want to see somebody succeed in whatever weird challenge they might be doing or unconventional. I shouldn't say weird.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely will. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you are interested in sharing your story, please shoot us an email to info@diabetesdailygrind.com. Cheers to the highs and lows, everyone.
One minor inconvenience, a little thing called diabetes. It's a daily grind, it's a daily